You are listening to the Political Periscope, a weekly podcast brought to you by Radio WNET. Interviews on international politics, security, geopolitics, economy, and more. Every Thursday at 7 p.m.
Today's guest of the Political Periscope is Sergej Sumlenny, Director and Founder of European Resilience Initiative Center.
Political Periscope.
The last time German government made a shift in their politics, a shift towards helping Ukraine, really helping Ukraine and engaging on this side of the war. Unlike before, they were more distancing themselves and they were more careful, I would say, maybe, in this help and this aid to Ukraine. Do you think this shift is permanent?
It is hard to say. What we witness now is indeed an unprecedented shift in the German foreign politics regarding exports of weapons, regarding solidarity with Ukraine against Russia. And that is important, that it is solidarity against Russia. And Russia always has been like some sort of a holy cow in the German foreign politics. And the fact that the German government, after all the debates and very long debates, and for you and for me, it is clear that it should have happened much earlier, way earlier. But after all the debates, the fact that the German government has decided to deliver almost every type of heavy weapons to Ukraine with one simple goal to kill Russian soldiers, like it is very clear the aim of these weapons. It is not some sort of some sort of preventive defense when like we show the strength and the enemy will not attack, which would have happened if these weapons would have been delivered like in January last year or in 2021. Then we would say, okay, like it's not for the war, it's just for showing strength. No, now these tanks and this artillery is being sent to Ukraine to kill Russian soldiers. And that is amazing shift. That is what nobody could imagine before. That sort of sanity, of decisiveness, of readiness to support a good cause. That is amazing. That is not to be discussed. Another question is how sustainable it is and what will happen when Russia is defeated. What will happen when Ukraine restores its territorial integrity and liberates the temporarily occupied regions. Will this solidarity with Ukraine stay, or will this decisiveness remain in the German foreign politics? If something like we have witnessed in Ukraine, if something like that would happen to another country, will the German reaction be the same or faster? Or Germany would say, no, we have already done one heroic step and we're not ready for the next one? This is absolutely not clear now, because I think that Germany and German society and German political elite, they are not ready yet even to digest the level of this change and the level of the challenges we face now. And I think we will need like a lot of self-reflection to understand what we have done, what we have not done, and what we can do and should do in the future to do it better.
You said that Russia was a kind of a holy cow in German foreign policy for years. Why?
It's a long story. I don't know where to start. We clearly witness in German-Russian relations a history of at least 200 and maybe even 300 of years of special relations. These relations have been based on economy, on political interest, on some sort of spiritual practices, like this idea of Holy Russia, which knows some secret and which is so spiritual. We definitely need it here in Germany. Of course, strategic corruption. Of course, interests of certain German economic and political circles. Of course, a lot of anti-Americanism. Like Russia has been seen as a counterbalance to the US, as a great player which Germany could rely on in perpetual German rivalry with the free society of the US, like German society, more hierarchical one, more conservative one, and the fast developing egalitarian US society. And of course, the interests of German political elites and of the German industry in the countries of the Central and Eastern Europe, like Poland, Ukraine, Czechia, and other countries, the Baltic countries. These countries, Germany used to see as almost non-existent, like as countries in between of Berlin and Moscow. They were like, from that perspective, they were a natural prey for two predators, Berlin and Moscow. And it is not what happened only during the Stalin-Hitler Pact in 1939, the division of Poland. The division of Poland has happened 3 times before during the Tsars. And if you look further, like in the days of Schröder-Putin cordial alliance, it was the same approach. The destiny of the Central Europe was decided over the head of the Central European countries by like the vodka meetings of 2 great leaders of 2 great nations. And that was, of course, another one component of this eternal love of Berlin towards Moscow. Like only with Moscow we could rule Europe as the way, as we wanted, as we believed we deserved to rule Europe. So this relation is very multi-layer and old. Like I wrote recently an essay for Ukrainian magazine Arc UA about this Germany's delusion of Russia, how it grew up from Catherine II time, of the privileged status of German settlers in the Tsar's empire, and later like all the opportunities which German managers up to now had in Moscow, which they never had in Germany. Like if you come as a middle level German manager to Moscow, like in the year 2000 or 2010, you got to quite another world, quite another universe. Like you get to paradise, because your salary suddenly jumps. Like you get way more salary because you're expatriate and there are all the threats in Moscow, but you pay only 13% income tax, unheard for Germany. You get your car, you get your apartment in the center of Moscow because Moscow is a dangerous city, and of course you need to have a representative apartment. But that is like normal. That is what you got in every like striving economy. You go to Kuala Lumpur, you get the same. You go to Brazil, you get the same. But what you get in Moscow was quite different, of quite different liga, because you got access to the political leadership immediately. You got invited to breakfast at Russian Foreign Ministry, Russian Ministry of Economy. And amid sanctions, you get even more of these invitations because the Russians see you as a tool against the sanctions and against the political will in Berlin. You don't need to respect the law, like the labor law. Like Russian labor law is very liberal, like neoliberal, but you don't even need to respect it. You can hire and fire. You can harass your employers. You can like do whatever you want. Like you can sexualize and objectify your female employers. And you can the projects, giant infrastructure projects, which you would never be able to implement in Germany because of environmental regulation, because you need to have confirmation from all parties, like from, if you build an airport in Germany, it's a catastrophe because you need to get approval from the environmental office, you need to get approval from the city hall, you may not construct it too close to the living area. If you want to destroy like some pond or some garden, you go to court and it can last for years. In Russia, opposite, like you have a green light from Kremlin, you may do whatever you want. You build an Olympic village in Sochi and you just deport people, villages, you destroy their houses, like you build roads on the cemeteries. You build some ice hockey halls in a tropic climate. It's something like a feeling of being a German colonial officer in Namibia in 1810, when you can do whatever you want, and the only person you're accountable to is your chief officer in Berlin. It's a great feeling for those who wanted to do something, but were not interested in respecting moral or law. And that created a huge lobby for Russia inside of the German society, because Russia was the only place where you can do whatever you want and be who you always wanted or dreamed to be, like in the West world.
You mentioned the Germany's will to rule Europe with Russia at some point. Today, Germany seems to be as far from ruling Europe as it was in last 3 decades, at least, I would say.
Not every stake in a casino wins. Imagine Russia had won this war in Ukraine by capturing Kiev within 3 days, which was not unrealistic. That is what I need to stress. Many people say now, Putin was so stupid, he has attacked Ukraine in a vain hope that he can crush Ukraine, but it was impossible. I'm not sure it would be possible for Putin to gain total control, sufficient control over the occupied territories. But I believe he could indeed destroy or at least severely damage Ukrainian state system. And Kiev was very close to fall if Russians would have established sustainable control over Hostomel airport on the city suburbs. It would have allowed them to constantly expand the control of territory, to arrange an airlift and to conquer Kiev within indeed 3-4 days. And then the TV picture would have been quite different, with the Russian banner waving over Khreshchatyk, and the Western governments would have been very reluctant in providing more support for Ukraine. And we remember that for the time in March 22, Ukraine didn't have any heavy weapons. The only Western weapons that Ukraine had were anti-tank missiles and anti-air portable missiles like Polish Perun and American Stingers. And that was it. So Russia could indeed obtain control over Kiev and demonstrate it to the West. Then a new start of international negotiations would be inevitable. And Germany would be leading in this negotiations. And Germany would force Ukraine into some sort of peace deal, into some sort of compromise. So I don't think that this scenario would have been absolutely unrealistic in early March last year. So, but you're right that Germany invested too much of its influence and money and interest in Russia, and gets punished for that even by now. Today, 20th March, we have news that the largest German car manufacturer, Volkswagen, which used to be once the world's biggest car manufacturer, overlapping Toyota, all the Activa of Volkswagen in Russia have been arrested today because the court, if I may call this Russian institution a court, believed that, or judged that Volkswagen has violated its contractual obligations towards Russian manufacturer gas, as Volkswagen quitted the contract, and all Activa Volkswagen have been frozen now. So now look, Volkswagen invested a lot of money in Russia since decades. Volkswagen was the first, or one of the first German manufacturers, one of the first, because the first one BMW, the first mass producer of cars, which came to Russia. Volkswagen founded a huge car automotive production cluster in Kaluga, close to Moscow. Volkswagen brought producers of equipment, of tires, of electronic, of everything. Vladimir Putin personally opened the new assembly line of Volkswagen like 10 years ago with a huge photo session. And Volkswagen believed they got control over their own destiny because they had these special relations with Russia, and Germany is welcomed in Russia, and German cars are a symbol of German industry. And now they are producing their Volkswagens close to Moscow, and that opens the whole market of Eurasian economic area in Kazakhstan, in Armenia, in Belarus. You can export them everywhere. And that was like winning in a lottery. But in effect, it was a huge mistake because Russia took their money as hostage. And now they just do whatever they want with this investment, because you cannot just take your factory out of dictatorship and evacuate it. So that is what's happening with the German investment. And that is the consequence of ignorance, of short-sighted vision, and of delusions or delusions.
At the same time, DHL is restoring its operations in Russia. But in Europe, do you think this leader position of Germany that it held for years is still viable, or are there new leaders emerging, new countries that can speak to the US, that can be the voice of Europe outside, and new countries that can push their policies in the EU?
I don't believe that German influence would completely disappear. It is unrealistic. Like, we have over 18 million people in Germany. That is the biggest country on population. We have, despite of all economic problems we have, and our economy requires deep modernization, but despite of all problems, we still have pretty strong economy. If we look like on absolute numbers, like it is slow, it is some sort of archaic, but it is still important. And we have like a lot of influence within the EU, like legally, politically, etc. And of course, within the alliance between Germany and France, none of these countries is ready to allow the new emerging powers in the East, Poland or Czechia or Baltic countries, to completely switch off the French-German alliance. And from that perspective, both countries would act together. And without the UK on board in the EU, the influence of France and Germany is even getting bigger, like just from that perspective of concentration of power. But what is realistic and what we observe is that Germany has proven itself as a country, like morally and on soft characteristics, like as a country which cannot lead. Germany has deliberately chosen the way to be led. And it was the most important Germany's message to the world during this war. It was not that, we are too scared of attacking Russia, or to say in Russia that we're not on the Russia side, we won't say thanks. No, it wasn't the main message. The main message was, we don't want to be the first. That was what Scholz said to everyone, from Biden to Morawiecki. He said, we will not steps, but that is what leaders do. The leader does the first step, and the leader leads by his or her example. If you say, I will not do the first step, you're not a leader. You hide behind your friends or comrades. You may be a reliable friend or comrade, but you're not a leader. And that is very important, because the new countries have taken steps faster and more effective than Germany. And I mean, first of all, within the EU, it is Poland. Within the NATO, it were the UK, the US. Okay, the US had their own problems, but the UK, first of all, Baltic countries, of course. Baltic countries are unfortunately too small to, like, even combined, to incorporate the heart and like the center of the EU. But of course, their influence will be bigger after this war than it used to be before. So what we observe now, we see that in other countries in the eastern flank of the EU are getting more important. They have proved that they are vital, that they understand the situation better than Germany, that they have resources, that they are strong, that they are decisive. Poland purchased a hell of a lot of military equipment. And frankly speaking, I even like, although I welcome it, sometimes when I look at the numbers, I think, my God, where would you like to use all of this equipment, all of these tanks and artillery? You will be soon, you will soon have a stronger army than the US. But anyway, Germany has failed to preserve its economic and political lead, which used to be the reason why we have been so proud of us. So we don't have army, but we lead using economic and diplomatic means. We could not. We haven't managed to improve our army. We know now that Bundeswehr is weaker now than 1 year ago. Like no new purchases of weapons have taken place. We know that we have worse relations to our important eastern neighbors like Poland, first of all, than we used to have before, because of all accusations and arrogance and lack of trust, after all. And our economy, which would not have been a problem by itself if we could have proven that in other cases were okay. But in combination with other weaknesses, it can be very dangerous because our economy doesn't grow as good as it should. And we know that we have a huge amount of people who de facto unemployed, who are dependent on social payments. Maybe they're not unemployed technically, but they have that few money that they need to apply for social subsidies to pay their rent or do other things. We know that we have huge problems with our transport system, our train system. We don't know where to buy high-tech equipment because we don't produce our own. And purchases from China can be toxic. We don't know what to do. We still use archaic communication means like fax devices. It's like a legend now that we still use them. And our system is so archaic in many ways. I have experience of living in different countries, and the German way, how you as a small, mid-sized entrepreneur, when you create your company, you create your company in Ukraine within 2 days. You create your company in the UK within maybe 1 week. In Germany, it can take you months. And after that, it's not a surprise that people who wanted to go self-employed and to found their companies and try to do it. And you need 25,000 euro of capital to find the company. And out of this 25,000, you need to pay in cash at least 12,000 on the first day. So all these people who could have gone self-employed and try their luck and try to do something, they get so strongly discouraged by the state to do that. So many of them just decide, okay, I will better do nothing. I will get my social insurance payment for maybe 1 year. Then I will find some job. Life will be better. I just do nothing. And that is a very, very significant and natural problem for Germany. Not like some economic crisis, not some rivalry with other countries, but inability of our economy to get vital and vivid.
You mentioned bad relations with Poland. Recently, we've been observing many verbal, even attacks towards Poland. I found out that German Goethe Institute financed or co-financed a clip promoting abortion, which is, of course, in accordance with German policy, but it was aimed at Poland. Especially, the Polish government in this clip was compared to Putin, was even said to be worse than Putin. It's a clip of some activists, but they got funding from Goethe Institute. The thing is, why so much hostility in Germany, in German government towards Poland?
Well, I would separate two different things. First, I need to say, due to all my solidarity with Poland and due to all my fascination, what your country has done for peace and stability in Europe, and how important your decisions were and are for peace, for my life, for the life of my children, I clearly cannot support many of the decisions which Polish parliament or Polish government applies in internal politics. Now, that's natural. I have quite different views on many things. So from that perspective, I would say that, for example, the abortion laws, I can pretty well understand why many Germans would have criticized the same laws in any country, Like in Germany, we had the same discussion. We had a huge civil movement against anti-abortion laws, and we still had some of them in the legislation until now. And now they can be weakened step by step. So there are two different things. One thing, when you criticize and even harshly some things which are happening in internal policy of your neighbor, and you would have criticized them also if they would have happened in your country. For example, if in Germany the same anti-abortion legislation would have been adopted, I would be a vocal opponent of it. And another question is saying that Poland is a quasi-fascist or fascistoid country. What we hear regularly at the political discussions, which Polish government is not. It is clearly it is not a fascistoid government, okay? And comparing to Putin, I have many problems with Scholz and with Angela Merkel, but I would never say that Scholz is like Putin, because Putin is a killer. Putin has destroyed democracy completely. Putin killed his opponents. Putin put people into jail for opposing him. And I can say that, okay, some saying of Scholz reminds me on a saying of Putin, but it's not. It doesn't mean that Scholz is like Putin, right? So that is a huge problem in Polish-German relations. I'm afraid that in many they are so multi-layers, and any question. If you go deeper in this discussion on the reasons and motives, you will land sooner or later at the topic of destruction of Warsaw and creation of death camps and all the traumata, all the crimes which were not completely discussed even in the German society. Because inside the German society, we have mostly accomplished our discussion with the topic of the Holocaust. And of course, there is anti-Semitism in Germany. And of course, there are people who are not happy with the idea of responsibility for the Holocaust. But you will not find enough support or any serious support in Germany for those who would try to thematize Holocaust and try to reverse. But we didn't have the same story with Poland or with any country in the Central Europe, maybe except for Russia. Russia is always a special case. But even the story with Russia is very much under influence of legends and some sort of distortion. But with Poland, we didn't have it. Quite the opposite. With Poland, we have another aspect of this discussion. We love to be presented as victims because of the refugees, because the German ethnic Germans who were expelled from Poland. And despite of the fact that, of course, any expelling of ethnic group is a questionable act, and of course, local crimes always happen during these events. But it is not true that Germans were in German-Polish relations were victims. And that is what is being said now pretty often. We have a special issue of German conservative magazine Compact, dedicated extra to the question if Poland is guilty for World War II. And like they had a whole video talk show elaborating this story, like how Poland prepared the World War II and all the discrimination of ethnic minorities between World War I, World War II, and how Poland was guilty for World War II. That is terrible. That is terrible. And that is not only a lie, it is also a soil for revanchism, and it undermines European unity and everything. And if you look further, we don't have in Germany any system which compensated all the victims of the Nazis. Because of course we had like some reparations and some compensations, but look, like some survivals of the German Nazi system of kidnapping workers in Ukraine and bringing them to Germany. They have got first their compensations. Only those who survived first got their compensations in late 2010s, and it were like some little like hundreds of euro, maybe a couple of thousand. So nothing, literally nothing for years of war with the interest, nothing. The same happened to other nations, even the nations within the EU. Like we have the same problem with Greece. So like we have the story of destroyed villages in Greece, which have never been compensated. And we have the same story with Poland. We lived for decades in some sort of like frozen reflection of these atrocities, in a hope that time will make the crimes obsolete, and that the compensation will never be like required for the harm which had been done. But it cannot be the case when we, at the same time, when we want to, and that was like this very strong German feeling, we wanted to demonstrate our neighbors that we are more clever, stronger, more powerful, richer, etc. And of course, in this contrast, when you say, okay, like I will tell you what to do because I am bigger, stronger, I have more money, my economy is stronger, and it is like some sort of, sometimes it crosses the border of crosses the limits of arrogancy. Then of course our neighbors and our partners start to say, okay, why are you telling us that? Haven't you forgotten what you've done on our lands? It just doesn't fit. And from this perspective, this conflict was pre-programmed, because what Poland does, the Polish government says, you must compensate for what you have done. And from any like civil law perspective, it is legit, because if harm had been done, harm must be compensated. And there are, of course, different ways to calculate the harm, but theoretically, if I ride with my car into your shop, then I will have to compensate all that this crash has. And if I'm bankrupt, then of course I cannot like give all my money, but then the court will establish the sum, like how long and like how intensive I should repay my debt. In international law, it doesn't happen. And the harm is of that huge level, including deaths, including psychological harm, including environmental harm, including harm on the cultural values. Like many cultural values the Nazis have stolen from the occupied nations have never been returned. Or like the stolen equipment, the workforce. Like, has any of German companies repaid like all the debts produced by the forced labor? No. So from this perspective, when the Polish government comes with the invoice, the Germans say, "Oh no, it's terrible. Like it's so much. It cannot be that much." Of course, it can, because it is the harm plus the interest. And if you don't want to have your debts haunting you, you need to find other ways to compensate it. And you need to, or at least you don't need to be so arrogant and try to play an elder brother. So that is a paradox, because I'm afraid that for a longer time in German-Polish relations, this history of invasion and occupation and destruction will hunt these relations down, and you just cannot it's like I'm not a German-born person. I'm naturalized in Germany. I'm Russian-born, and when I come to Warsaw, I can never forget what this city could have looked like if not the destruction of the city, deliberate destruction of the city by the German Nazis. And when I stay in a hotel and I know that this hotel used to be a center of resistance and was deliberately destroyed later by the Nazis, it is not what I cannot forget. And it happened 80 years ago, but it is still vital, because when you are in the center of Warsaw, when you look around, when you see the buildings, it immediately, if you have a little bit of knowledge of history, you immediately recognize what does it mean? What does it mean? And it means a huge wound in our relations. And this wound will not be healed with German arrogancy and with all the accusation that the Poles have done that wrong, they request too much, they are misogynists, they are that. It will not help.
There are also current, modern relations, and there is one thing especially that we Poles cannot understand. Germany pretends to be ecological, pretends to be all for renewable energy sources like wind or sun. But the thing is, at the same time, we are observing Germany shutting down nuclear power plants, which are safe, which are efficient, which are ecological. We are thinking about building one or many, even many, more than one, in Poland. And Germany at the same time is giving up on this relatively cheap and clean energy. Why?
Well, it's a hard question. The problem is that we do not have ideal solution for clean energy. Even if you look at nuclear power plants, I personally am not totally against nuclear power plants, but we see that, for example, in hot summer in France, a lot of nuclear power plants had to be shut down because they need cooling water, and cooling water you get from the rivers. And when the water in the river is already warm and it is a low level of water because of the drought, you may not use that much water, because otherwise you pump out the hot water to the river and just boil the whole fish. So the French economy had to significantly reduce the amount of electricity produced by nuclear power plants last summer, for example. So the nuclear power plants are unfortunately not an ideal solution. Of course, if they already exist, no sense to just dismantle them and shut them down and say we'll never use them. It is, of course, it is not clever. But here we are on the ground of German non-rational emotional decision. And Germany has a long tradition of taking decisions on scientific questions based on semi-religious, quasi-religious, spiritual understanding of how the world works. We know this this idea of the holy German nature, German forest, German mountains, etc., going back to the middle of the 19th century with the German Romanticism and nationalism and Caspar David Friedrich and and all this movement of hiking tours, etc., etc. It is a complex story. For many Germans, burning coal looks to be more natural. It's not ideal, but more natural than having a nuclear power plant, because when I burn coal, it's what my predecessors did, and I understand what is happening. But when I have a nuclear power plant, it is technology, it is evil's work, it's wizard case. I don't like it, and it is not the most important factor which influenced the German decision, but one of them. And of course, we had also the Russian lobby, which lobbied for gas for years, and we hope that the gas will be a substitute for energy we need to be Brückentechnologie, or bridge technology. And after that, we had problem with Vladimir Putin and no more gas via Nord Stream 2. Then we had to search for new sources for gas. But brown coal remained a significant part of our energy mix. And that is problematic. Because, of course, like we hope, we have renewables, we have windmills, we have solar panels. But neither windmills nor solar panels are ideal from the point of view of environment in a global context, because they need rare metals, they need other components which are very hard to recycle. They need space. We can produce biofuels, but for biofuels we need to destroy landscape too. So in any way of producing energy costs you something, and you need to transport energy, you need to store your energy. If the production is volatile because of the weather, like with solar or wind, it's even worse, etc., etc., etc. But to make this long answer shorten, fear of technology, and in this particular case of nuclear technology, has a very long story, and it goes back to Chernobyl and Fukushima and other cases, and you just cannot ignore it. It is irrational, and as many irrational feelings, it is very hard to be compensated by rational arguments.
It's quite a different image of Germans and Germany that we are used to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This was The Political Periscope. The podcast is released every Thursday at 7 p.m.